started, just to say that today is actually a first for us, I think, because it is the first time that we've done more of a practical workshop. So the plan is that we will walk you through some pre-agreed functions and formulas that we think it will be useful for you as beginners to see and understand. And then hopefully we'll have enough time for any requests, any questions you've got to be addressed at the end. If we don't have time to get through all of those requests, then we're very likely to put on another session for beginners anyway. So we will simply use those requests as the basis for the next session. We are also planning to put on an intermediate and an advanced Excel course webinar in the future as well. So watch the space for those. So all that really is left for me to say is to welcome my colleagues. I'm joined by my colleagues Adrian Smith and Chris Ravenscroft, who you can see on the screen, who are going to lead the main part of the session. And then we'll be joined by Claire Rolfe and Hayley Randall to just be on hand to respond to any queries that you might have, any requests that you might have as we go through the course of the session. So that is it for me. I'm going to stop sharing and I will hand over to Adrian, who's going to begin our session for today. Thank you very much, Aid.
Thank you, Suze. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen so you can all see the demonstration. Hopefully you can all see that. Well, welcome. Thank you all for attending. Thanks, Suze, for the introduction. So yeah, Excel. Excel is I guess quite a few of you obviously heard Excel. You may have used it in your work. It's very similar to the other Microsoft packages that Microsoft offer, so Word, PowerPoint, etc. So in terms of like the menu bar at the top, it's very similar to that. You'll have this is called the ribbon, and you've got different options up here. So it initially it looked quite daunting. There's a lot of functionality within Excel built in, and it is a tool to help you. And obviously, if you're working with data, information, lists, contact list, information about text, Excel is a good tool to use. We've been using it since the outset of Ddechreuwyr, and we wouldn't be able to do many of our projects without Excel. We use it for a whole range of things. A lot of how we work with data. It's a good place to hold data. Not necessarily as a database. Obviously, you can do that in other ways, but it's a very good way of like processing and manipulating and looking at data. And Chris later on is going to show you some of that functionality in terms of like that. First of all, so this is basically the what you'd get if you opened up a fresh Excel worksheet. It's the green button on your Microsoft packages. If you're using a PC, you should have this pre-installed. So the first sheet will be, it's an open sheet. We've got a few examples of the kind of data that we're going to work with today. So to rename a sheet, you've got this option. You can right-click that, rename, and you can just type in the name of the sheet. This is really beneficial, because then if you've got multiple sheets, then they can all be named differently. They do have to be unique, so you can't name the same sheet twice with the same name. Obviously, we're dealing with quite a lot of data, so we tend to split some of our data sheets up across the workbook. So the workbook is a combination of all the sheets together. We use a lot of Excel in some of our data collection forms. Obviously, we receive a lot of data from local government, and Excel can help with that, and obviously enable us to be able to collect and validate data that we get from our data providers. You can also use it to create lists. So this is just an example of something we've got from Office for National Statistics. So it's a notes page related to the data set we're about to work with, and every single cell is basically, here is text. You can put numbers, text. You can align things differently, which we'll show. So it's a really good tool for storing information. Be it data, be it text information that you want to create a list of a contact list. We would essentially use Excel for that. So there's so I'm going to go through the data set we're going to work with. So this is a simple data set we've downloaded from the Office for National Statistics, looking at population estimates across England and Wales. So you've got columns, you've got rows. Essentially Excel is a grid system. So you've got nearly infinite amount of rows going downwards. They're all counted, and multiple columns going across. So in terms of the size of your data set, Excel would probably meet the needs of that. If you're dealing with large data sets, obviously you may have different ways of storing that, whether it's on some sort of database, SQL database server. But Excel is a very good common approach that a lot of people can use, and hopefully after today you'll get some of the hints and tips of how to use it. And don't be afraid to try things out in terms of using Excel. There's a lot of functionality in it, and obviously today's session will give you that kind of introduction to it. So you can any cell is available to type numbers in. So you can type numbers in. You can type text in. You can use the delete button to remove them. Simple key navigation on those. You can make columns and rows different sizes if you need to. So there's so say these 3 columns, I wanted to make them slightly wider or thinner. You highlight them, you go up to the format option, you've got column width. So you can set it, I think that's how many points. So if I go 10, what happens there? You'll get some issues with that, because obviously the columns aren't wide enough for that figure. So if you do see hashes, that just means it can't display that number. They're still in the actual cell. You can actually see them up in this, what we call a formula bar up at the top. So I'm going to just adjust that and go column width and put that to 20. There you go. So it's a bit wider, so you can start seeing the data. There is, there's ways of presenting data, and there's pros and cons of how you display data. One of the good practices that we promote is in terms of showing data. So you've got numbers, you tend to align them to the right. So to align, if we wanted to align all these numbers across there, you would highlight those columns, and you've got up here these options for alignment: align left, align central, align to the right. So if I do that, so that puts everything to the right. So you've got numbers, and also what it's done is put anything that everything to the right. So what if I wanted to get rid of that row? This is surplus to information. We don't need to know the codes in this table. Right click it and delete, and that will remove that. We get the option to we want to put the headers. So when we have text, they tend to be centered aligned or left aligned. So you've got the option to move them around like that. So depending on how you want to present the data, you've got options around that. And if you want to add, sometimes it's useful to add sort of grid lines. If you wanted to break that's an obvious header, you've got the options to, like you have in Word, you've got the options to make that bold. You can underline it. You can make it italics, turn it off. You get all the same functionality you would do in a Word document, I guess. So if I wanted to add a border to that, so you click down in the font section. So all these are buttons. Got the option to add a bottom border to that. And then if you actually want to go into the more borders option, and you get the options here. So this is where you can actually, I wanted, depending on where you actually want the, and you've got so many settings in terms of the thickness of the border, the color of the border. So, and then there's, other tabs. You've got so many different ways of formatting cells within Excel. The sky's the limit, really, in terms of how you want to present things. But in terms of not cluttering up the information, we tend to promote sort of, white background, dark text, probably the best way of reading it. But if you wanted to add any colors, we don't necessarily do that. You can use the color fill color. So you've got the option to, if I just wanted the light shade of gray, so you can actually make it obvious that that's the header and the rest is the data. So the people amongst you who've notice there's some differences here in terms of how that's presented versus that one. So because this is a figure over 1,000, it's put in 1,000 separators, and that helps you understand and see that data a lot better. So the way to present this data in the same way, you can highlight the same things. So you literally just use your mouse navigation, dragging across there, and you've got the option to you've got different formats. So I want to keep that as a number. I want to put 1,000 separators. So that little button, that's literally, if you just hover over anything in Excel, it gives you a little box to say what that will actually do. So what that's done, it's presented it in the same way as the figures above, and you'll notice that it's added decimal places. These are all whole numbers, so we're not really interested in seeing the decimalization there. So you can increase and decrease the decimals in terms of making it more presentable. You've got done the alignment. So if we wanted to add any fonts, different fonts to this, so this is as we've already put it to our corporate font. We tend to use Open Sans. It's we find it's our corporate font. It's very useful in terms of reading and how things are presented. But you get the options to all different fonts. So for within your organisation, you may have another corporate font, so you can change the font in this drop down depending on how you want it to be presented. So that's sort of like the formatting side of things. There's so you can the header's already in bold, but if you wanted to turn that off, you've got obviously the same options you have in Word. And you've got the options. I think for sometimes headers you would want to maybe put them in increased font to show that they are a header if you want to do that. So like I said earlier, you've got multiple options of editing how you want something presented. You can even make things wider if you wanted to make these. So what I showed you earlier was how you actually do it, in terms of like the options here. If you highlight columns like that, you can manually make them as wide or as thin as you want. And this is more of a manual way of doing it, of just seeing how it looks on screen. So there's options around. So Excel, you can move data around if you need to do that. So similar to Word, you've got the options of copy and pasting and cutting and pasting. So say I needed to move that data set to another column, you've got the options to control copy, which is the control button. Control C, and then you've got the option if I right click that cell now, I've got the option to paste. I've got the option to paste values and paste formulas. So the three, they're slightly different options. So if these have got formulas, which Chris will be showing you a bit later on, you get the option to paste those as formulas. But because these are just raw numbers, I'm just going to paste as values. So it's literally just moving that data to another column there. And obviously the formatting is gone, so you can get the option to change that back. It's a bit of clicking, but like once you get used to the navigation and what's up here on the what we call this is like Microsoft would call this like a ribbon. So it's a ribbon of options of type of formatting you can do. So just checking my notes. Lines. I think that was most of the things I want to show in terms of formatting. This is giving you a bit of a flavour of the kind of things you can do. But obviously, the more you use Excel, you can explore different options, and the other things we'll leave to a sort of a later session. But I'm going to pass it over to Chris now, if that's all right, and he can show you some of the more in-depth functionality around using some of the formulas we have in Excel. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Can everyone see that okay? I'm going to assume, if there's not cries in the chat, that the Excel spreadsheet hasn't gone away. So I'm Chris, and I'm going to be going through some formulas and ways of organizing data and ways you might want to present that data with charts. So I know a few of you heard the word formulas and are suddenly crying out and might have left the meeting, but don't worry, it's very simple. All that means is instead of typing our data into a cell, we are going to tell Excel to do something for us. So I'm just going to delete Adrian's example here. So I can right click and delete. And we have our data set that we might want to do some sums on, count things up. So the simplest formula we can do is addition. So exactly like you would a calculator, you click on a cell. So on the top, your formula bar might look like this. So this is where we are going to put our formula. I'm going to press this arrow to make it bigger. So if you've got a really, really long formula, you can scroll and do those things in there. So how can Excel tell whether something is a formula or whether I'm just typing, you know, hello or any other number into Excel? So we have to tell it, hey, Excel, we are doing a formula here. And the way we do that is we press equals. So now Excel knows, okay, everything after that equals is now a formula. So we can, like I said, the simplest formula we can do is addition. So as you can imagine, you would in your calculator, I can type in 2 plus 2, press enter, and the cell has changed into a 4. So it looks like a 4, but if you click on it, it actually still displays the formula. So the formula is going to stay there, even if it's calculating something and showing something else. So we can do similarly for all the other order of operations. So if order of operations, all the other operations. So if we did take away, subtraction, 2 minus 2, that's correct, Excel, we've got a 0. And we can also do multiplication and division. Multiplication in Excel is use the star. So if you press Shift 8 on your keyboard, you'll get the star. And that's very common with computing. So just be careful you don't type in 2x2 because Excel probably won't like that. And division, we use a slash. So in the corner of your keyboard, we can get 2 divided by 2, and that equals 1. Excel's got it right yet again. So all we've done now is just used Excel as a calculator, which is fine, but it's quite boring. So let's use some of the information that we've already got here. So we can make references to cells that already exist. Each cell has a reference. So for example, this all persons cell, it is in column A. So it is called A, and then it is in row 4. So that cell is called A4. So we can actually put equals and then type in A4, and it has copied that cell for us. If I click on the formula bar, it has highlighted the all person cell A4, and it's highlighted the same color in the formula bar up here, so that you can click on the formula and it will show you what cells that formula is using. Let's get a more interesting example. So let's say we were tasked with calculating the number of people in Wales in 2022 who were aged between 0 and 14. So we don't have that in our data group. So we have all these age groups. We don't have 0, 14, but we can calculate it by summing these cells together. So let's go and do that. So using simple addition, we can go for equals, and then we can, instead of typing the cell, we can simply click on it and it will fill in immediately. We've got D8, add the plus again, D9, and D10. So when we press enter there, we've got our value. So let's mark that with a title just so we know what that is. So that is Wales 0 to 14. Fantastic. So another great thing about formulas is that they are automatic. So when we click on this cell, it always references those 3 cells. So if I get a call from ONS and say they've messed up, but actually the 0 to 4-year-olds is 150,000, not 152,000, then I can go in my spreadsheet, make that edit, and you'll notice that our formula has updated automatically. So that's really good and can save a whole lot of time. So we can also copy and paste formulas. So if we wanted to calculate England of those aged 0 to 14, let me just make that a bit bigger so we can see it. So I could retype the formula in again, or I could copy and paste the formula, and it will copy the formula over. But how does it know that that's what I wanted? So what it's done is it's moved our references to the left because we've moved the cell to the left. We've copy and pasted. So because England is to the left of Wales, everything has moved over correctly. We can also do this by pressing this little. So at the bottom of each cell, there's a little, I don't know what we'd call it, a little widget, a little square thing, but our cursor changes and we can drag our formula like that. And as we can see, that has worked correctly. So we've calculated the England figures without even having to type anything in. Excellent. There are some circumstances where you don't want to copy the formula. So let's say it's like, oh, I just want to take that number and use it somewhere else. So I've done my Control-C, my copy, and then Control-V. Oh, that hasn't worked. And the reason it hasn't worked is because it's taken the formula and now it's adding a bunch of empty cells. That's no good. So if we wanted to get the value without formulas, we can paste as values. And as you'll notice at the top, it's taken the value, but the formula hasn't carried on with it. So there are also some scenarios where we might want to move the formula, but we don't want the cell references to move. So with that, we can use what's called an absolute cell reference, where we tell Excel, no, I want this cell and only this cell. I do not want you to move it at all. So in an example here, we can, an absolute cell reference is you use the, what's the word called? A $sign, that's what I'm looking for. So you put a $sign before the column and before the row of each cell to make it absolute. It's locked in place. I never want a different cell ever. So we can do that for our value. So let's go for D8. Let's just do D8 and see what happens. So if we move our cells along, we've got a value. It's not the correct value. It's not a value that makes sense. But as you can see, D8 is stuck in place, whilst all the other cells have drifted off. They've moved. So that might be very useful if we're doing calculations where we do want some things to be locked in place, but other things to move about. So let's go over an example that we might want. So I'm just going to make some space for us by inserting a column, right-click Insert. So let's say I want to calculate the percentage of the population that is in Wales. So I'm just going to mark it with percentage Wales. It's not a fantastic title, but it will do. So then I'm going to use divide. So I am going to take the Wales figure and I am going to divide it by the all persons and then press enter. So we want that as a percentage. So let's turn that into a percentage. So 5% of the population is in Wales, and I can drag that down There's no data there, so it's got confused. So there we are. That's all the percentages. So it's only 5–6%. And we might say, let's do that for England as well. But as you can imagine, it hasn't worked because the formulas have moved. So in that scenario, we might want to lock the column down for that. So that's an example of where an absolute value might come in handy. You can lock individual values. So if I wanted to, so let's just go back up here and do percentage Wales. And let's do the same thing. So we've got D4 divided by B4. We can turn that into a percentage. And we want to calculate percentage of England. So let's try and drag our formula so it works properly. So we want the Wales figure to move to Wales, but we want the England and Wales figure to stay fixed. So we can do that by locking the column. So we can put a $sign before the B. So we are telling Excel, look, no matter how much I move my formula, I want that column B to stay put. It doesn't matter about the rows. I can move the rows up and down, but B is going to stay put. And hopefully we should have something around 95% because they should add up to 100. And yet Excel has done it again. Fantastic. So that's making cell references and locking them in place with absolute references. So let's go over a couple of functions now that we might want to use. So let's clear up our old mess and talk about some functions. So functions are essentially keywords. You ask Excel to do something by giving it a word, and it will do it. So a simple function that we might use is sum. So again, starting with equals because it's a function, a formula, sum. And it tells us with the tooltip, it's going to give us a list of options. We could do sum, we could do sum if, sum product. And sum is the top one, and that adds all the number in a range of cells. That sounds like what we want. So all functions are going to have brackets after them, which is where we're going to put all our cells. So it tells us the layout it's expecting. It's expecting a number, and then a comma, and then a number, and then a comma. But we can actually cheat by choosing multiple cells at once. So let's highlight and sum all the cells we want. And you'll notice that it's added a comma between those two cells, D8 to D10. So what that means, it's all the cells in the range of D8 to D10. So that's D8, D9, and D10. We'll press enter, and it's given us the exact same value as if we did the addition. So that has worked successfully. Another function you might want to use is the average function, and it works in exactly the same way. We type in average, and then we can do our data. So we can find the average for all these numbers, and it's given us that value of 164,691. For average, you'll have to make note that it is the mean and not the median. You may have heard of a couple of averages, but the average function just uses the average as most people would imagine it. You add all the numbers together and then divide by the number of numbers. There's also the count function, which we can use to count numbers. So if we count all of these numbers, then we get 19. And slightly differently, there is also count A, which counts either text or numbers. So count is just for numbers, but if you want to do text, count A works for that. And we should get the same number as R, 19. And so there are also functions like the maximum, which is equals max, and the minimum, which is equals min, where you can find the maximum and minimum. Functions don't have to just work on numbers. As you saw, count A uses text or numbers, but we can also put text into some of our formulas. So, for example, the concat function, short for concatenate, is a function that stitches together different strings of text. So we can use that to actually create some dynamic text. So if I type in equals on cat, so now it's expecting text. So we tell Excel what I'm typing now is text by putting quotation marks around it. So the number aged 0 to 14 in Wales is, and then I'm going to put comma because it's expecting a new piece of text. What text do I want to give it? Well, I'm going to put space after is, so that will appear. And then I'm going to give it this number here. And as you can see, we have a paragraph that gives us what we want. So if that number changes, there are now only 3 people aged 0 to 14 in Wales, then our paragraph has updated. So that's going through some of the basic functions and how they work. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at a slightly different data set, but to get a feel for how you'd want to organize your data. So this is a bigger data set. As you can see, we've got a large amount of geographies, and this is the population estimates for each year. So from 2022 to 2011. So to make things simpler, I'm going to delete the top part because I do not need those notes. And then I'm also only interested in the data from 2017 onwards, so I can delete that. And I am only interested in the Welsh data. So how can I do that? So this is where filtering can come in. So if you go to, let's see if I can find it first time, data, and then filter, this can, hold on, let me turn on the filters. So I will highlight the ones I want to filter. Oh, see, just mine. Oh, that's because me and Aid are sharing in. Why has that not worked? Okay, so what we're going to do instead is we are going to turn it into a table. So let's go into highlight it all, and we are going to format it as a table, and we've got a whole bunch of options we can do. So why has that not worked? Oh, there we go. Apologies, it seems like Excel was taking its time with that one, but the filtering options are not there. That is very odd. I have not seen that before. Technical difficulties. So what we can do is we can filter our data. So let's see if I can do it manually, or if let's reset the formatting. If not, we might have to. Oh. My apologies for this. A bit confused why it's not functioning as I would expect. Let's try it again. It's working. Does anyone have any ideas why maybe the right? So I've just had a little hint that it needs to be the title row. So let's highlight the row and press filter. I'm going to start a fresh page just to get rid of all the formatting and the mess I've made of it. There we are. So we've got our data in its rawest form. So we can highlight the top row press filter, and alas, the filter has finally shown up. My apologies for that. I'm not entirely sure why it wasn't working the first time, but there we are. So now we can filter our data. So if we just want the Wales data, we can look for our code. We know that all the Welsh data begins with W. So I think excellent, that's an easy thing to filter on. So I can go here and we have the option, we can sort our data alphabetically, or we could filter it by text. So I'm actually going to type in W there, and it's already selected everything with the W, and that is excellent. That is what I want. So I'm going to do that, and it has worked. So all of our data here is for Wales, which is what we want. So like I tried to do earlier, we can also set our data into a table. So the reason that might be useful is if we want to reference it as one table as opposed to a bunch of cells put together that happen to be next to each other. So let's see if it's going to behave today and set up as a table. It will. There we are. Perfect. So in a table, we have all the sorting and the filter functions that we had when we had the filters turn on. But in addition, we can also make references to the columns. So you may have noticed in the mid-year estimates, one of the formulas was slightly different. Well, that's because this was actually set up as a table. So let's say we wanted to calculate how much the population has changed in Wales. Oh, my apologies, it's now a new sheet. So we need the 2022 number and then minus the 2017 number. So let's see if we can do that. We can press equals. And you'll notice that instead of doing the cell number, it is referencing the column itself. So that at mid 2022 is referencing the column. And then we can minus mid 2017. So it's a bit more readable. But in addition, when I press enter, it fills it in for every row. So we now have a new column. It's decided to call it mid 2017 too. That's not very good. So we will call this the population change. And we can see the population for all of these local authorities. And it's the same formula in every one, but it's done it for every row. So this data is now ready to go and ready to present with. So there are a couple of little tricks we could use with data. So if we imagine we had 100 years and we'd have to scroll over here, we might get a bit confused, but we'd lose track of the geographies. I'm going to be over here finding my data and go, oh, hang on, where's Wales? Oh, it's there. We can actually solve that by using something called a freeze pane. And what that does is it locks some rows in a view, so they will not scroll. So let's give an example of that. So let's go to view, freeze panes, and there we are. Those columns are locked in place. So regardless of how far I scroll, I will always have those columns available. And you can unfreeze your panes here. Perfect. So let's actually try and present this data. So there are a whole bunch of ways we can present data. There are a whole bunch of chart types. I'm just going to go over a few simple ones and how they might work. So let's go for the population change. We want that mapped on a bar chart. So Excel is usually quite good at knowing what you want by default, but when it breaks, we might need to have a bit of a manual input. So let's highlight the data we want. And a little tip, we can press Control and highlight. And what's that done is it's selected those columns without undoing my other selection. We can go to Insert and we can go to Bar Chart. And there we are. We have a chart of the population change by the local authorities. Now we notice Wales is kind of because of the population change to Wales, it's kind of overshadowing the rest of the points. So what we can do to make it clearer is we can remove Wales by going to the filter and unticking Wales. And there we are. Perfect. So this chart is very simple. It's not the cleanest thing, but we can see the local authorities where the population has actually decreased in the last 5 years. It's always good practice to add a title. Chart title isn't very good, so we can do population change 2017 mid-year estimates, just to give it a source. You might want to source it properly if you are putting this out there. And it's also good practice to add axis titles. So we currently don't have an axis title. So what we're going to do is we are going to go into chart design and we are going to add a axis title. So we go into add chart elements, go to axis titles, and we can add a vertical axis title. So here we can add population change, just so it's clear exactly what we are talking about. I'll go over one more chart type. So one of the charts that you might see is a pie chart. So pie charts are only useful when the total means something. So imagine that we added Wales and all the local authorities into a pie chart. That wouldn't make sense because then the total would be Wales plus all the local authorities. So it's Wales twice. The percentages wouldn't mean anything. So let's stick with ignoring the Wales value, and we are just going to put the population by local authority into a pie chart. So we can go into insert again, and we can go into pie chart. There are a bunch of options for pie charts. We recommend not using the 3D pie chart. Any 3D effect tends to distort the data, and it's not very clear. And there we are. It has mapped a simple pie chart. Of course, we'll want to add a title, as we do. And we also want to reorder this data a bit, because this is in geography order, which is fine, but we might want to order it by size, so we can sort from largest to smallest. And there we are. As we go round the clock, it goes from biggest to smallest, and that's just easier to see. We can also add elements. So we probably want to add some labels to this. So let's go to chart design, add chart element, data labels. So where do we want our labels? We might want them at the end or the best fit. And then we can change these labels because I don't want them to be numbers. I want them to be percentages. So we can go here and we can go into format data labels, and it is going to pop up a whole bunch of different options. We are going to change it to percentages. And there we are. You'll notice that this pie chart is still a bit busy. It's not the best pie chart. If we wanted to do this properly, we might want to group some of these local authorities together, maybe into their regions, so it's a bit less busy. But to demonstrate how it works, it's fine. So the way data selection works is if we click on the chart, you can see it's highlighted it. So similarly to formulas, it's still going to be there. So if you change the data, the chart will also update. If Excel messes up and it doesn't understand what you're doing, you can edit the data yourself by going right-clicking and pressing select data. And there you can make edits to the chart range, and you can also swap the rows and columns. Usually Excel swaps the rows and column is the most problematic thing it can do. So there's a button there you can press to fix all that. And you can also make edits to the series names and the series data. So if you want to edit in particular individual series and their labels, you are able to do that just using the references. So again, we can just press equals and then highlight as before. So I think that's everything I wanted to go through. So thank you so much for listening to me talk about charts, formulas, and organizing data. So I'm going to move you back to Suze, where we're going to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and thank you to Adrian as well, both of you. We, as you'll have seen, we've tried to fit an awful lot in to a very, very short space of time. But hopefully that has provided you with a real introduction into Excel generally, and then obviously the data functions that we would use most commonly within Excel. And Chris wonderfully showed that even for data experts and Excel experts, it doesn't always go right first time. So thank you for that, Chris. It's totally planned. Okay, we do have a couple of questions in the comments. They are not straightforward and not easy, I don't believe, but we'll have a look at them and we'll see if anybody can help in the 10 minutes we've got. So freezing panes where they're not in order. Claire is going to jump on and show that how we might do that.
So the answer is that you can't freeze the columns or panes unless they are side by side, but you can freeze a heading or a row and a column at the same time. So bear with me, I will show you. Okay, so at the moment you can see, no, because I'm not sharing, sorry. Newbie error. Somebody let me know you can see that. Yeah, thank you. So at the moment you can see I've exported some data here, and if I scroll up and down, everything's moving. So if I wanted to freeze the local authority code and the name, I would click in cell C2 and then view freeze panes. And what that does is it allows me to scroll up and down, left and right, but keep the authority code and name in the same place.
Thank you very much, Claire. But yes, the answer is unless the columns are next to each other, you can't freeze those. If you had two columns that you did want to always keep, the best thing you can do is to move the columns so that they are next to each other. So you, I think we've shown you, but you would click on the very top of the column on the grey bar that is at the top of the column, and you right click that to do cut. And by cutting, it takes everything that is in that column and it doesn't change it at all. And then you would, I don't know if somebody can actually show how we might move a column rather than describe it actually. But yeah, what you would do is move the column so that they were next to each other, and then you can freeze panes based on that. Is somebody okay to show how we would move a column in that scenario, please?
I can do that in the same spreadsheet.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Okay, so if we wanted to bring in column F, so highlight the whole row, right click, cut, and then if we wanted to put it at the beginning of our spreadsheet, so highlight column A, right click and paste. So now our column has moved from column F to, sorry, I should have done that the other way around. Let me undo. Oh, sorry, no, it's there. Sorry. Stage fright, I'm afraid. Yeah, so.
Perfect. There we go. So you can move your columns, you know how to move columns, and then you can freeze the panes when they are next to each other. That is one solution to the problem, I'm assuming. I'm going to jump over Naomi's comment very quickly first and go to the recap on the formula used to calculate percentages. So Chris, I'm going to call on you to do that if you don't mind. You can go back in and redo the calculation that is the percentage.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I'll just share my screen real quick. So for a percentage, all you're doing is dividing one number by another. So for the formula for that, so for our Wales divided by England and Wales, all we do is we press equals, and then we press our cell we want, and then we go for a /, so beneath the question mark at the bottom of your keyboard for a divide, and click the other cell, and it has, what has happened there? We're not having good luck today. The formatting doesn't work. So the reason that's happened is because it's expecting a number, but obviously we've calculated the percentage. So it's going to be less than 0, between 0 and 1. So the way we fix that is we go to number at the top here, this formatting options, we press percentage, and it's done that for us. And then we can add our decimal points. So if we want a ridiculous number, it's probably sensible if we just want a couple. So all percentages is dividing one number by another, and then you can format that number to appear as a percentage. Because if we turn it back into a regular old number, it's going to be 0.05, which is below 1, or 5%. I hope that makes things a bit clearer.
Thank you, Chris. Okie doke. So I think we're going to get in touch with Naomi separately because I'm not sure we fully understand what that question is asking. So Hayley is on that already. There we go. Does anybody else have any further questions or requests for stuff that we can show you now, or particularly for any future sessions that you'd like us to walk you through in the future? If so, please enter them in the chat now. Or obviously you can do that after the event, and like I said, I'll put some contact details up once we close the session, but you can contact us then anyway. So can you show us again how to freeze the top row and the first column at the same time? So Claire, can you go back in and do that again, please? That would be amazing.
Okay, so let me unfreeze. Okay, and I'll just chop out that blank column. So if we wanted to freeze column A and row 1, you would select cell B2 and then freeze panes. So then that will, you can scroll up and down, and you can scroll right to left without your header or your first column moving.
Thank you very much. So that's excellent. We've got some comments and suggestions for future sessions. So Kerry asking about a heat map using postcodes. I think that'll be for a future session, although we can contact you specifically, obviously, in advance of the next session. And some pivot table love, which is excellent. Again, I think for that one, we'd be looking to our advanced session, because those are quite advanced in terms of Excel functions. As you'll have seen from today, we're talking quite basic here. So the next session that we are hoping to run is on an intermediate one, and that'll look at certain things like conditional formatting and kind of a few more advanced techniques for how you might interpret and manage a data table. And then, as I said, the advanced session that we'll be looking to run will touch on things like pivot tables and kind of going quite a bit further in terms of some of the manipulation. That said, if there is any more basic beginner stuff that you'd like to know, then please, as I say, just let us know either in the chat now or after the session. So suffice to say, thank you very much. I am going to put our contact details up just so that you have got them. Second. So those are the contact details, so feel free to get in touch with anyone on there. And you've got our inquiries email address there. Hayley's put her contact details in the chat, so she's going to receive all of the direct correspondence from now on. And that is just for me to say it's time. So just thank you to all of you who've attended. I really hope you find it useful. It's very much just a session, a starter for 10. But we'll hopefully be putting more of these sessions on in the future, as I've said. And then obviously just to thank my colleagues very much for sitting here and walking you through those things. It's never an easy situation, and they did it brilliantly. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for attending.